So anybody know what we've been looking at this whole series? Work, good. Anything more than, that's good. That's a great, it's actually the right answer. We're talking about work and what else, anything else with it? Thorns and thistles, okay, good. What else? Faith. Yeah, and specifically Christian faith. How does that combine with work, which is what we spend the majority of our time doing, whether it's something we do as like getting paid for, or whether it's something we do just in general. We are made to actually work, and that is to take the things in the world and to do stuff with it, right? Like to be very general. That's what we're talking about. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of talk through, on the back of your sheet, if you turn it over, you have that triangle. We're going to talk about discerning calling. One of the topics that has come up through our discussion so far is this idea of calling. We looked especially at Martin Luther's understanding of calling, vocation. We get that word vocation from the Latin word for calling. And we're going to talk about how do you discern what your vocation is or should be. And it's, by the way, that's a static thing. It's not it's a dynamic thing. It's not a static necessarily. It can change, right? It can actually be led at different seasons of life into different things. So we're going to talk about how do you discern that. That's going to be and we're going to do a couple case studies. We're going to talk through like, okay, here's a guy who's got this situation. How can we determine what his calling might be? And then what I want you to do also is be thinking, as we've gone through this series, some of you guys have come up afterwards and go, oh, hey, we had a question at our table. It was really good. We were talking about X, Y, or Z things. I'd like to hear what any of those questions are, because at the end of this series, I think Nathaniel has a Q&A kind of like a panel. And I'd love to get a little fodder to help these guys who are going to be on that panel be thinking about it. So if you have questions that have come up that you want to have some other people talk into, be thinking about what those are. And before we break for our discussion groups, I just want to jot them down from you, okay? So let me pray, and we'll jump into the passages and our time together this morning. Lord, you're good, and your mercy endures forever. You've given us our life and our breath and everything else. It comes from you, for in you we live and move and have our being. And this morning you've given us your Spirit, you've given us your Son, and so we have hope in all things. And so as we talk about calling, we ask that you would really instruct us and teach us in the way we should go, counsel us and watch over us. And I pray for each brother here this morning that we would be men who know what it means to walk in submission to you and in fellowship with one another and do our work well and heartily as unto you, we pray through Christ. Amen. All right, the two passages we want to look at just to kind of give us a little bit of direction for the rest of our time. Romans 12, verses 3 through 8 says this, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. Let us use them, if prophecy, in proportion to our faith, if service, in our serving, the one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness." And then Paul also writes to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 17, "Only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is my rule in all the churches." So a couple comments about these verses. The first thing to notice is that all of life is grace, and that is to say, a Christian perspective of life as a whole is that it's an unmerited gift. So I think the best little mini definition of grace is unmerited favor. So the fact that any one of us is alive, or even as I prayed earlier, that we have life and breath and everything else, that's all a gift from God. So it's grace. The fact that we're here together this morning, everything we have in life ultimately comes from God. And so it's a gift. So it's grace. It's something that we're unearned, but it has been given to us with favor. Okay? So that's the first key. When we think about work, that needs to be a pervasive idea. Is that the fact that we have bodies and we have minds and we can do stuff, that's all a gift from God. And every one of us has been given grace. Now, what do we do with that grace? We don't think of ourselves more highly than we ought to. Why do you think he says that? We're prone. We're prone to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to. And some of you guys may go, well, I don't know about that because I don't feel very good about myself. But I want you to think about this for a minute. Why do you not feel good about yourself? Because you're comparing yourself to other people, most likely, and you don't feel like you measure up. So you think you ought to be better than you are, and so you're bummed out about it. Right? That's just the way that rolls. And so the way you eliminate all that is you say, wait a minute, I don't need to think of myself as highly as I ought to think of myself. And somebody who's thinking it all this morning, I know it's a little early, you say, well, I don't know how easy to do that is, so how do I do that? And he follows up by saying this: think of yourself with sober judgment. That's one word in the original language. And it basically means think of yourself with wisdom, with honesty. Have real integrity when you think of yourself. Think of it like this. You're looking at yourself in the mirror, and you're being really honest about what you see. That's what he's saying. Is look in the mirror. Every day, look in the mirror and be really honest about what you see. Don't look in the mirror and see some model or some great, whatever. Instead, just be really honest about what you see. And you say, that's a little scary. He says, that's right. That's why I give you a measure of faith. You have to believe, and what is the idea of measure of faith is simply this, that God will provide. I think about different definitions of faith. I think one of the simplest and best ones is, I actually believe that God will provide. I just tell myself God will provide. I look at my face in the mirror and I don't like what I see. I say, it's okay. God's going to provide. And we look at our hearts. We don't like what we see. We say, it's okay. God will provide. That's what Abram did, right? He said, God will provide. And that's a good idea of faith. So if we want to know what it looks like to understand our calling, we have to kind of go, God's going to provide for me. I can trust him. I don't have to strain to try to make myself something that I'm not. All right, let's keep going with this. And then he gets into this language of members, and Paul does this in other places as well. But he says each one of us is a member in the body. So he's like, other places like Corinthians, he says not everybody's a finger, not everybody's a head, not everybody's a foot or a knee or a heart, right? Everybody has different. This is the body. It's made up of all these different parts. So we, as a body, are made up of different parts. I think, and this is a little side comment, I think American men have the hardest time with this image. We kind of go, okay, yeah, and we move on from it. But American men are the most individualistic people in the history of the world, arguably. We think of ourselves like we want community. But the reality for most of us is if we move into community very much, it gets abrasive pretty quickly. And as soon as it gets abrasive, what do? I'm out. Those jerks, I'm not hanging out with them anymore. Nobody in that place gets me. It's that kind of stuff, right? And instead, what this is saying is, if you can get people who are really different to sit down at a table together and actually stay at a table together, that's huge. And the church actually provides a safe place to do that. So that's something I'd like to continue to lean into in these years as we move forward as men in this church, is to say, what would it look like for us to actually invite people to the table who are very different than us and learn to really not just tolerate one another, because nobody wants to be tolerated, but actually learn to love each other. Now, if that happens, then you start seeing really beautiful things, because all of a sudden the membership in the body becomes more beautiful and fuller, healthier, so forth and so on. All right? So that's what's going on here in the first one in Romans chapter 12, verses 3 through 8. In 1 Corinthians 7, he's real clear. He says, let every person lead the life. This is just, to me, it's very simple, clear language. And what you read here is exactly what it's saying. Let everybody lead the life that God's assigned to him. That idea of assigned is simply, it's like apportioned. It's like, hey, here's your apportionment. It's like if we're cutting meat, and I'm in charge, I'm the chef, and I get to cut the meat, and I get to dish it out to everybody. I give you what you're serving. This is your serving. Some of you guys are in the military. When you come through, you just get what they give you, right? You're not like, hey, can I have a little more of that? Is that the way that works? You're like, no, that's not the way that works. You get what we give you. And that's the same idea. It's the same word here, is that we're apportioning out different things. And God has apportioned different things to different ones of us, and he's called us. Again, that word called there is the idea of summon. It's not just like, hey, John, It has that connotation as well, calling out, but it's actually a summoning. It's like, John. See the difference? So God does both those. He says, hey, John. And he's like, John. And that's all part that feeds into the idea of calling. Okay? Questions on that before we move to the chart? I'm thinking things like, what if I don't like my calling? What if I don't like the apportionment I got? What if, like, even with the illustration of, I didn't get quite enough mashed potatoes on my plate? What do we do with that? Well, we come back to the sober judgment idea, right? We look at ourselves in the mirror and go like, okay, well, why do I want so many more mashed potatoes? All right, if you flip it over, discerning calling. There's 3 different ideas we're taking into this, and this is, I first heard this from Edmund Clowney. I took a class with Clowney. Clowney's passed away quite some time ago now, but I took a class with him. He threw this up there, and I've been using it ever since. And he's got a book, I think it's called Called to Ministry, so he's thinking a lot about ministry, but this actually works for any calling in life. It's not just ministry. We'll talk about ministry a little bit in one of our case studies maybe, or case studies. But the first thing is ability, second thing is affinity, the third thing is opportunity. Ability, affinity, opportunity. When you discern a calling, all 3 of these things are in place. Okay? The ability idea is things like talents, training, affirmation. That would be abilities. Affinity is things like passions, attraction, and experiences. Opportunity is needs, requests, open doors, you might call it, and there's resources. Okay? And when those 3 things come together, that's a good indication that that's probably a good calling for you, a good place for you to be. Okay, so let's take a couple examples. I just thought of a couple kind of silly ones, maybe. Well, the first one is a salmon fisherman. Anybody ever been fishing for salmon? Okay, all 1.5 of you. Okay, so salmon fisherman. Let's think about this for a minute. Let's say that you spent summers up in Alaska fishing for salmon, up in the upper Northwest fishing for salmon, and you're really good at it, and you got some training in it, right? And the guys in the boat were like, please come back next year and do this again. Right? And you have an affinity. You loved it. You had passion. You had attraction to it. You've had the experience. You're getting better and better at this, right? And then it comes to opportunity, but you live in the South Pacific, and you don't have any money to get back to the Pacific Northwest. And they're a couple 5,000 miles apart. Do you have a calling to be a salmon fisherman? And the answer is only if you can get back there. You see that? So you can sit down in the South Pacific and think about being a salmon fisherman all you want and say it's your calling, but if you're staying there on the island of Fiji or somewhere, let's say, you're not getting back up to where you need to be to do the call. Okay? You can catch tuna or something else, whatever's down there, right? Okay, so that's obviously it's a little silly, but you start seeing the idea, right? Let's play it out with the pastor, like being a preacher. Okay, so let's say that you have and I happen this honestly through the years I've worked with a lot of church planters. These are usually men who are going into areas that don't have churches or they want to develop a new church there, and helping them discern whether they have a calling to do that. And you'll see this kind of thing. They have a great passion for it. They want to see people come to faith. They want to see people who do not know Christ come to know Christ. Okay? So there's an affinity for that. They are attracted to that. They have this kind of pioneering, this evangelistic zeal, this, you call it lowercase a, apostolic zeal. They want to see the gospel go places it's not going, have impact in places it's not having impact. Okay, and there's an opportunity. There's lots of needs for this, right, throughout the world. The other day I was talking with some guys. There's like over 3 billion people in the world today who have never heard the name Jesus. 3 billion. That's a lot of people, by the way. Okay, so there's opportunity, there's needs all over the place for this, to have new churches started up. One of the things that Covenant, for example, is looking at right now in the missions committee is who are unreached peoples in the world, and what might be an unreached people group that we could begin to pray and give and sacrifice on behalf of, that they might know Christ. Right? That's pretty exciting. So there's lots of opportunities. And then ability, this guy cannot communicate the gospel for the life of him. Whenever he stands up and teaches, everybody walks out more confused than when they walked in. And they're like, Yeah, I like that guy's zeal, but I don't know what he said. And by the way, that happens a lot, unfortunately, when you're dealing with some of these guys. So does he have a calling? Probably not to preach. Not unless he can keep working at it and get a lot better, right? And all of us have it. This doesn't mean you can't get better at something, right? Because you should. But that goes back to the ability piece. You've got to keep working and getting training, that kind of thing. So what I would say, like when we would assess guys, I would say you have to, you need to go back in for 2 more years, and here's a route to take to continue to get better at communicating the truths of the gospel into the culture in which you are living and working. Make sense? Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean you're anything like that. In other words, it's not judging a person according to their moral standards at that point or their moral character. It's just saying that in terms of your ability at this point, you're not there. And so that's why you go back to school. That's why you go back into situations with internships and so forth and so on. Make sense? Okay. How about an accountant? These are all 3 quite different jobs, right? Everybody agree they're kind of different? Okay, so let's say that a guy is very good at numbers. He knows how to he knows how to do it longhand. He knows how to use a computer. He knows all the latest technology to do that. And let's say he has got a great passion for it. He loves numbers. When he goes to bed at night and I'm dreaming about sheep and clouds, he's dreaming about pi and how many digits out he can keep it memorized, right? So he's got an affinity for it. He dreams about keeping spreadsheets that balance out. Like that guy? Are any of you guys this guy? Because I probably need you in my life if I can stand you, And you but there's just no jobs anymore because Claude's around, and Claude's an AI agent. He does it all for him. Does he have a calling? You see how this gets interesting? And that's what when we think about our callings, and we think, now let's take all these 3 different ideas, and let's put it where you are right now. How is this working for you? Do you have a sense that in your job right now, in your work, in whatever the work is you're doing, in day in, day out, do you have the ability for it, the affinity for it, and the opportunity for it? Now, here's one thing to note. And this is always one of the things I want to be a little careful about, is if you have, you have to grow in each one of these, right? Different seasons. So, for example, there are seasons of life when you may be have a lot of affinity for your work. And you have a lot of passion, you have a lot of attraction to it and whatnot. But there may be other seasons where you're not really there, right? Okay? Does that mean you're not called? Not necessarily, but we want to think of it as base and phase. At the base level, is this you? Even though you may be phasing it out of it for a while, right? Like there are seasons of life when there's other things going on, and I'm just not that excited about certain parts of my calling. But is it still part of what I do every day? Yes. So don't get too this is just a kind of a picture of how this can work out. How does it work for you? Think about ability. Do you have ability at what you're doing right now in your job? In other words, do you have talent? Do you have training? Do you have affirmation? Do other people say, hey, you're doing a good job? Like, do you ever hear that? Or do you kind of go like, yeah, I don't even know if I know what I'm doing here. Okay? Affinity, do you have passion? Do you have attraction to it? Do you have the experiences that back it up? And then opportunity, is there a need for it? Are there requests? Like, are people saying, hey, you could do this, I need you to do this, so forth and so on? Open doors and resources, okay? So I hope that's helpful. I want to take the time for a few questions right now. You can ask me questions about this if you want, or I'd also like to hear questions that you guys have been working on as you've been sitting around your tables. And I'm going to jot these down, and maybe if somebody else can. Ron, are you listening this morning? If you jot down whatever you hear, that would be great. Yep.
So with respect to ability, how do we make sense of, for instance, Moses, when God comes to him in the burning bush?
Yeah.
I'm not strong in speech.
Yeah.
Clearly there's a calling there because God is directly saying to him, I want you to go do this. But Moses is himself deflecting on his ability. So how do we make sense of that?
That's really good. So the question, I'll just repeat it so everybody hears. So take Moses, for example. Moses is called. Everybody agree? Yeah. Yeah, audible voice from God, a burning bush, that's pretty obvious. But he's not gifted. He doesn't have the ability. And what does God tell him? I got you. I'll be with you. I'll provide what you need. So that goes back to the idea of grace, that God is going to provide it. Now, and so that kind of gets at the idea that, and I always hesitate. Preachers are just so notorious for using bumper sticker phrases, right? You know this, right? And you know the phrase, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Okay, that's true. I mean, it's kind of silly, and I wouldn't push too far with that, but that's true. If he calls you to do something, he's going to also give you the ability, the affinity. He's going to do those things for you. Yep. All right, what else? Okay, what questions have you guys been processing or thinking through at your tables? Again, this is going to be some fodder that we might give anybody who's going to be on that panel. I know there's some questions about AI that came up at one that I've talked. See, here's what happens. I walk out here at the end or hang around afterwards, and some of you guys go, hey, our conversation was really great. We talked about this, and we had some more questions about this. And I go, that's awesome. And then halfway through my day, if I don't write it down, I'm like, what were they talking about? So that's what I'm trying to remember now. So you guys, we can have joint ignorance if you want. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good one. Thanks, Eddie. Other questions that have come up at your table, John? Okay. Do you want me to talk to that right now, or are you saying that's a question you all have had? No, I just had that question. Okay. That's just you. Okay. So I think this is kind of like what I was just saying. Yeah, let me try it and see if I get it right, okay? Because tell me if I got it right. Well, I'm your translator today, so we'll see how I do with that. I took it at what you were saying, John, as your passions wax and wane for a certain work that you're doing. Does that mean you aren't called?
Yeah, but I guess what I was trying to say is, you start off a career you're really passionate about it.
Yep.
And then you get tempted by other flashing and your thing. It's like, go do this and do that. But the people that are most effective are the ones that just say, this is what I'm really good at. I'm going to stick with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like a generational, passive cultural. It's growing and developing other people, but the passion just isn't there. And I feel I've seen so many people just fall in that trap of chasing the passion.
Mm-hmm.
When they're squandering really real value of chasing passion over and over.
You guys hear that back there? It's passion, chasing passion, when oftentimes the most effective people sustain over the long haul, even generationally, with a certain type of work.
And so, but the passion would be an illusion.
Yeah, the passion. It's like shiny things to chase after. They can be an illusion to go after. Yeah, I think okay. So it's kind of maybe layered because right, like all of us are wired differently as people. That's why stuff like the Enneagram got so popular, because it's a way to kind of understand the way different people function, right? And so any kind of tool like that to help you understand is going to give you, it's going to give you some indicators, but it's never truly who you are, because we as people also change, right? Like it's part of that way that works. So these are just my thoughts on this, is like I come from a line of generations of people who've been in the same industry in my family. My granddad, my dad, my brother, my nephews, they're all in the same line of work. So I'm the black sheep in my family by not doing that line of work. And by being a pastor, I'm a black sheep anyway, right? But the idea there is when I started looking at what these guys were doing, I was like, that's not me. Okay? There are times, I think, in all of our lives, and some people, I lost my train of thought. Oh, some people would say, if I had the same, if I'm a government, if I work for the government, and I get it at a certain level and stay at that all the way through, that's success, because it's concrete, it's stable, it's steady, right? That for some of you guys in this room today, you're like, I wish my job could be that way. Others of you in this room right now are going like, that would be the worst thing in the world, I would hate that. And so what we have to do is make sure we can respect across the board those of us on one end of the spectrum who are like, I just want stability, and I want to know where I'm going to get. I want to have something in the bank when I finish.
Say it this way.
Okay.
Sometimes a calling is higher than passion.
Okay. I don't disagree. He said sometimes a calling is higher than the passion.
And how do you recognize
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll have to think about that. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
But I think it translates into a lot of things. It could be like a work job. It could be staying at a church, but it's just not right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you're headed to that church.
Yeah. And again, you allow for the differences. Some of us have a very high, for example, value of loyalty. And so I will stay somewhere until hell freezes over, right? Others of us are like, no, dude, they're not preaching the gospel anymore, I'm out, if you're talking about church.
Is this a confusion of like calling and duty though? Like you feel like
Yeah.
this day?
Yeah, so the comment up front was, is this a kind of a confusion of duty and calling? And I think that's maybe good too. We jumped over to the idea of church, I jumped over to that, so. Yeah, I don't know, this is good. This is a good line of thinking. Yeah, John and Bryce. John, you go first. You're better looking.
On the flip side of that, if you're a Christian business leader, don't embrace the promotion to failure concept. If somebody has a passion for something and they're good at what they do, they want to just be a good heads down engineer or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And make it work
Mm-hmm.
so they can actually just
Yeah, his comments, if you couldn't hear, were if you're a Christian business leader, don't embrace the false idea of promotion to failure. I mean, I think of people who are really good at sales, and then it's like, well, they're so good at sales, let's move them up to management. Like, I don't know many guys who are really good at sales and are really good managers of people. I know a few of you guys are exceptional, but most people aren't. So, like, why do we do that? Yeah. Bryce?
I think, and you referred, your second example was about a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
These don't apply universally, certainly. But 1 Timothy 3 talks about desiring the office of overseer, elder. He who aspires to the office of overseer desires a noble task. And so it's part of the calling to the office of elder to desire that, to
Mm-hmm.
have this internal desire for that,
Yep.
to have this passion for that. So I think that while it's not, circumstances are different in jobs and all the rest, and sometimes we do think this is our job, we don't like any part of it. But then there is something in the internal call, I think, to, big call, to desire.
Yeah, that's good. We talked about ambition earlier in one of the weeks. Is ambition always bad? The answer is no. There is such a thing as godly ambition. That would be an example of godly ambition. I have a desire to do something to serve the church, to be an elder or deacon, and that's a godly desire. And so we should aspire to those types of things, right? And so there is some. And then in theological circles, we talk about internal and external calling. This fits within that. This is just a little more kind of drawn out. But the idea of internal calling is, do I have a desire, a passion? Is it something inside that's burning in me to do this? And is it externally, do other people affirm those gifts and say, yeah, that's what you're good at. Yes, that's what you need to do. Yes, we'll come alongside you to help you get there. And you have to have both. If you're like really passionate, like, kind of back to the example of the pastor, is if I'm really passionate about preaching the gospel, but everybody's like, you can't communicate, then I need to go back to the drawing board and get better educated, something else, get better trained, whatnot. So, okay, we're going to break into our groups now. If you have questions that you didn't get to voice out or you think of them at your tables, write them down and give them to me afterwards, just so we can kind of get that pump primed for the panel when we do that in a couple weeks, okay? All right, hit the questions.